Hello, sir. Hello.
Yes, madam. I'm here.
So just 5 minutes, we'll start the session. Students are joining the session.
No problem.
Okay. Sir, we'll start the session.
Yes, madam.
Okay. Sir. A very good morning to everyone. I, Dr. K.L.E, convener IIC R.L.Science, and all the members of IIC R.L.Science, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We are happy to inform that our college has been nominated under Institutions Innovation Council, MOE Innovation Cell MHRD, Government of India. So under IIC R.L.Science, in association with MHRD, we are conducting series of webinars from 1st September to 7th September on different topics. So today's webinar topic is on National Innovation Startup Policy. The resource person for today's session is Dr. Sanjeev Ingargi, sir. And we are happy that sir accepted our request for the present session. So now I request our beloved principal, Dr. Jyoti Kavlekar ma'am, to say a few words.
Very good morning to everyone. It gives me an immense pleasure to welcome you all to the national webinar organized by Institutions Innovation Council, R.L.Science Institute, in association with MOE, MHRD Government of India, on National Innovation and Startup Policy, NISP, guiding framework for higher education institutions. As you all know that Ministry of Education through MOE's Innovation Cell, that is MIC, has launched IIC program in collaboration with higher educational institutions to systematically foster the culture of innovations and startup ecosystem in educational institutions. The main aim is to engage large number of students, faculties in innovation and entrepreneurship related activities. Firstly, I would like to thank the esteemed members of MOE, MHRD for selecting our institution under IIC institution type and giving us an opportunity. And today, as a part of this, our college, in association with MOE MHRD, Government of India, has organized a national webinar on National Innovation and Startup Policy, guiding framework for higher education institutions. This framework will also facilitate creation of robust innovations and startup ecosystem across all higher education institutions. For this webinar, we have amidst us an eminent speaker, Dr. Sanjeev Ingargi, Associate Professor, Department of Management Studies and Research, MBA, Govt Institute of Technology, Belagavi. Sir, I, on behalf of our management, our institute, and all of us present here, I extend a warm welcome to you. Welcome you, sir. At the same time, I welcome all the delegates to this interactive session. I now welcome Dr. Satish MP, IQAC and NAC Coordinator and Life Member and Member Secretary of K.L.E. I also welcome Sri Nanjapnar, Life Member and Member Secretary of K.L.E. Dr. Kirti Byargi, Convener, IIC, Ms. Sudha Sarikar, Startup Coordinator, and all my other team members and all my colleagues. Wish you all the best, and here I conclude. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, madam, for your words. Start.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, shall we start the session?
Good morning, everyone.
Ah.
It gives me an immense pleasure.
2 minute introduction.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. It gives me an immense pleasure to introduce our resource person, Dr. Sanjeev Ingargi, Associate Professor, Department of Management Studies and Research, Govt Institute of Technology, Belagavi, Institute of Engineering and Technology, Davangere, PGDBA in Messi University, New Zealand, MBA in Karnataka Open University, and PhD in Visvesvaraya Technological University, Belagavi. Also, he cleared UGC NET and KSET exams. He has 13 years of academic experience, 8-year industry experience in New Zealand and India, and 3-year post-PhD research experience. He has attended many faculty development programs, management development programs, workshops, and conferences. Sir has published many research articles and papers in various national and international journals, such as IOSR Journal of Business and Management, International Journal of Management and Behavior Science, Abhijnana, International Journal of Management and Behavior Science, EBSCO, Index Journal of Management and Science, Pragati Journal of Indian Economy, Scopus indexed IOP series Journal of Material Science and Engineering, Vilakshana 11 MB Journal of Management. He has attended many workshops and short-term training programs and as a resource person and keynote speaker. Presently, Sir is working as an associate professor in Department of Management Studies and Research, PhD Research Cell Coordinator, Institute Innovation Cell Department Coordinator, Industry Live Project Coordinator, Govt Institute of Technology, Belagavi, and also guiding a student at Vishwesvaraya Institute of Technology. With this brief introduction, I present before you Dr. Sanjeev Ingalagi. Welcome you, sir.
Okay, thank you, madam. Thank you for that elaborate introduction. So now, am I audible to all of you so that we can just quickly start with the session now? Am I audible to all of you? If I can just,
Yes, sir.
if I get some confirmation, then I can start. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. 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 Thank you. Well, very good morning to one and all here. And I really thank the organizing committee members, Dr. J.S. K.L.E, the principal of Raja Lakhamagouda Science Institute, which is an astronomers institute. I thank Dr. K.L.E, Professor Vinuta for inviting me here to deliver a lecture on National Innovation and Startup Policy, which is also known as NISP. And the focus of today's discussion will be on guiding frameworks for higher education institutes. Right. So I do not have any PPTs as of now. So whatever the experience that I have right now, so I'm just speaking on the basis of my own experience and whatever little knowledge that I have related to national innovation and startup policy, how this policy can be executed within a higher education institute. I will just give some thought upon some guiding frameworks. So ladies and gentlemen, let us try to understand what is this national innovation startup policy, when it came into existence and why it came into existence, why it has become more important for our education society these days. Well, in November 2016, AICT as well as UGC, they came up with a startup policy document. And the reason is to address the need for inculcation of innovation and entrepreneurial culture in higher educational institutions. That is the main focus of this policy. The focus of this primarily on the policy basically focuses on guiding the UGC approved institutions in implementing the startup action plan by Government of India, and further, the institution AICT and UGC, they received a lot of feedback from the different educational institute, and then they modified their guiding frameworks on this. Now, why this has become so important nowadays? Now, we all know that India aspires to become a $5 trillion economy by 2024. And to reach that mark, it needs to evolve the system mechanisms to convert the present demographic dividend that we have into a high quality technical human resource capable of doing cutting edge research as well as innovations and deep technology entrepreneurship. So therefore, National Students Startup Policy in 2009 was adopted by Higher Education Institute. And the main focus of this National Student and Faculty Startup Policy is to act like a guiding framework to envision the educational institutes orienting towards startups and entrepreneurship opportunities for the students as well as the faculties. And the guidelines provide ways to Indian higher education institutions for developing entrepreneurial agendas, managing intellectual property rights, ownerships, technology licensing, equity sharing in startups, or even enterprises established by students as well as faculties. So therefore, let's try to come back to what are the strategies and governance issues that are required to implement National Innovation and Startup Policy 2019 for the students as well as the faculty. So what are the things that we should be doing as an institution? Ideally, I mean, the first and the foremost thing that becomes very important is what sort of strategies and governance that we need to address when it comes to national innovation and startup policy. So entrepreneurship promotion and development should be one of the major dimensions for any educational institution for that matter. You know, nowadays, the focus is more on entrepreneurship rather than the placements, because over the period of time, the students, you know, when they get a job and they continue with the job, and over the period of time, they should not repent why they did not become entrepreneurs. So to facilitate the development of entrepreneurial ecosystem in the organization, specific objectives and associated performance indicators should be defined and for the assessment purpose. Now, the implementation of entrepreneurial vision at the institute level, it can be achieved through mission statement only rather than stringent control system. You know, we cannot have, I mean, for the entrepreneurship building ecosystem, we cannot implement this as we implement examinations. As we implement examination wherein the students come and they write some entrepreneurial subject, there will be some question answers, and after that, you know, they pass, the students pass, but then the mission doesn't complete there. It cannot work like this. You know, it has to have a very holistic ecosystem. Okay, so therefore I say that the implementation of entrepreneurial vision at the institute should be achieved through the mission, and it cannot be through control systems. The entrepreneurial agenda should be the responsibility of the senior person or a lead at the level of dean or the director or equivalent person to bring in required commitment and must be well understood by the higher authorities. However, one must understand that promoting entrepreneurship requires a different type of mindset as compared to other academic activities. So therefore, the person who is in charge of National Innovation and Entrepreneurship Cell should be very, very carefully chosen from someone who understands the industry and above all, somebody who understands the business. So that is number one important thing. Whenever, you know, we think about implementation of national education or national innovation and entrepreneurship policy. And number two should be Number two, and a very important one, is the resource mobilization plan. The resource mobilization plan should be worked out at the institute for supporting pre-incubation, incubation infrastructure facilities. A sustainable financial strategy should be defined well in advance in order to reduce the organizational constraints to meet the entrepreneurial agenda. So how do I do that? As a educational head or the educational institute head, how I'm going to do that? Well, what is possible is the investment in entrepreneurial activities that are happening within the institute, the institute should also be part of the financial strategy, meaning to say that the institute ideally, this is not compulsory, but it is an ideal situation wherein the 1% of the fund of the total annual budget of the institution should be allocated for funding and supporting innovation and startups related activities through creation of separate innovation fund. So this is number one requirement. So this is one of the guiding principles that we can just think about. And second important thing when it comes to implementation is the institute should come up with a strategy which also involve raising funds from diverse sources to reduce dependency on public funding. So bringing in external fundings through government agencies like state government, central government, such as DIC, DST, DBT, MHRD, or even UGC, DSIR, CSIR. There are so many funding agencies. And apart from that, Startup India Foundation, Invest India Foundation, MSDI, MSME, all these government institutions or non-governmental institutions, these sources should be encouraged by the entrepreneurs to apply for the fundings. Now, another important thing when it comes to strategy of implementation of entrepreneurship is to support technology incubators. Now, higher education institutes can approach many private and corporate sectors to generate funds under corporate social responsibility. You might be aware that some of these companies have, some of the known companies have funds set aside 2% of their annual budget as to spend on some social causes, and it is called as corporate social responsibility fund. Now, the higher education institutes can approach these private or corporate sectors under corporate social responsibility fund as per section 135 of the Companies Act 2013. I mean, here the institute as well as the company can do a joint venture. I mean, they can act as a initial investors for the entrepreneurship startup. So this is just an idea that can be thought about, that can be implemented. Institute may also raise funds through sponsorships from donations. Institute should actively engage alumni network for promoting innovation and entrepreneurship cell. Now, one of the major things, one of the major bottlenecks that we face when it comes to entrepreneurship is we tend to make a very slow decision-making process. Now, it could be a lot of reasons, like, there could be hierarchical barriers and all that, individual autonomy, ownership initiatives. To avoid all these things, the institute should minimize the hierarchical barriers, and there should be more of individual autonomy and ownership of institutions, or ownership of basically the initiatives should be encouraged at the institute level. Now, importance of innovation and the entrepreneurial agenda should be known across the institute and it should be promoted, highlighted at the institution programs. Institutions can come up with conferences. They can host a conference. They can come up with the convocations, workshops related to how to start entrepreneurs, how to start entrepreneurship, how to arrange for the seed fundings, how to go for the bank loans, how to generate an ideas. And therefore, the general public, including the students, faculties, they all will get to know about the importance of innovation and entrepreneurial agendas. Student and faculty startup policy should be formulated at the university level, which is in line with the current document, well-defined short-term and long-term goals. Micro action plans should be also developed by affiliated institute to accomplish the policy objectives. So another important thing is the institute should develop and implement the entrepreneurship strategy and policy for the entire institutes in order to integrate the entrepreneurial activities across the various centers, departments, faculties, and within the institute such as, and thereby breaking that department culture that we have here right now. This entrepreneurship strategy culture should not be only restricted to only one department. It should be done across the departments and maybe possibly at the university level. So mostly businesses, they require support from product development to marketing strategy for the startups. Most of the startups that they come, they require a lot of support in coming up with a product and marketing that product. And this strategy of marketing that product or financing that newly launched product or testing that market and testing that product for marketability, all these things need to be worked out by the institute, and they should be decided on case-to-case basis. Now, higher education institutes should be the driving force in developing entrepreneurial culture in its vicinity. This should include giving opportunities to in and around regional startups. Also, higher education institute can come up with an extend its own facilities for outsiders, as well as the active involvement of students as well as faculties. So this is one aspect of higher education institute, how they can help the entrepreneurship to flourish within the institution. Strategic international partnerships should also be developed using bilateral and multilateral channels. If not international, even at the national level, the institutes can have a tie-up with some of the segments here. Like, say, for example, Foundry Cluster is here. In Belgaum, we have a Foundry Cluster wherein most of the entrepreneurs are part of the Foundry Cluster. So institute can have a tie-up with the Foundry Cluster. And in addition to that, institute like yours, Lingaraj Institute, can come up with a joint MOU with the institution called as NIPM. It's a National Institute for Personal Management, wherein most of the corporates are the members there.
Table number
So
one.
that is how that is how the institute can come up with different partnerships. Now let us talk about startups and how startups enabling the institutional infrastructure. Now, creation of pre-incubation and incubation facilities for nurturing innovations and startups in higher education institutions should be undertaken. Incubation and innovation need to be organically interlinked. Without innovations, new enterprises are unlikely to succeed, as we already know that. The goal of the effort should be to link. There are three things which are very, very important when it comes to entrepreneurial success. So the first and foremost important thing is the innovation. To what extent the innovation is happening within the team, that is number one. Number two is the building up of enterprises. And number three is the financial success. Now, all these higher education institutions are advised to create facilities within their institutions for supporting pre-incubation. So for example, now we have IICs as per the guidelines of MHRD Innovation Cell. We have new generation IEDC Innovation Cell, startup cells, students clubs, etc., etc. So by coming up with startup cells or students clubs, the higher education institutions can accelerate or mobilize the resources from internal as well as external sources. What I mean by internal and external sources means, by mobilizing the entrepreneurship, using the students, that is possible. Or apart from students, you can mobilize the entrepreneurship culture by inviting outsiders to start the business with the help of institutes innovation cell. So that is one more possibility here. This pre-incubation facility that we are talking about, it should be accessible 24/7 to the students, staff, faculty of all the disciplines, all the departments across the institution. That is very much important. Pre-incubation facilities may or may not be separately registered. There can be, or these can be like special purpose vehicles. But what we think is there should be a separate entity, preferably registered under Companies Act 2013 or the society registered to act like an independent governance structure. Only the reason is because some of the colleges, it becomes difficult to invest. So if they come up with a funding of 1% and register themselves as one of the startup funding company under the Companies Act 2013, or they can also register as a society under the Society Registration Acts, which will help the institute as an independent governance structure. And in fact, this will allow more freedom to the incubators in decision making with less administrative hassles for executing the programs related to innovations, intellectual property rights, or even startups for that matter. And moreover, this kind of a structure, if we have this kind of a structure, they will have better accountability towards the investors supporting the incubation facilities. So this is one thing which can be said. Now, higher education institutes may offer monitoring, mentoring, and other relevant services through their incubation units. And it can happen in return for fees. I mean, if the institute is guiding some of the startups, the institute can charge some kind of fees for that. Or even the institute can enter as a joint venture with an equity sharing basis or zero payment basis. So these are some of the modalities regarding equity sharing in startups supported through these units will depend upon the nature of the services offered by the entrepreneurship. And again, this changes case by case. So these are some of the things that how the startups and institutions, they can share the kind of infrastructure with each other. Okay, now let us try to understand nurturing. How now we have discussed about what are the strategies and governance that is required. And secondly, we also discussed about some of the infrastructures that are required. Now, this is not enough. This is not enough. Now we need to go a little beyond that. We need to nurture the innovations and startups. Now, how can we do that? How can we nurture the innovations and startups? Now, the higher education institutes are expected to establish the processes and mechanisms for easy creation and nurturing of startups by the students. The student can be a UG student, he can be a BCom student or a BBA student or even a BCom student. A student who's studying in PG, he can be also one of the potential candidate for nurturing entrepreneurship. Or even the staff. Even the staff can also be involved in nurturing the innovation startups, whether the staff is temporary or a project staff, the faculty, alumni, all these people can be a part of your startup applicants. Even from outside the institutes, people should be encouraged to use the institute's startup facility so that they can come up and start their own businesses. Okay, so this is one of the ideas by which we can nurture the innovations and startups while defining their processes. Institutes should ensure some of the things like, say, for example, incubation support. What sort of incubation support that an institution can offer? Institution can offer access to incubation cell, the incubation facility to start up by students, staff, faculty for mutually acceptable time frame. For example, if somebody comes up with starting the business idea, so he can have an agreement with the institute's incubation cell for about 6 months. So within the 6 months, the company should start functioning. It should up and working. So it is based on time frame. In case if the institute doesn't have a dedicated faculty or infrastructure of its own, then there can be a possible in the institute can reach out to some of the nearest incubation center to facilitate the other higher education institution in order to facilitate their support to the students and staff faculty. Now, one of the important things we need to discuss when it comes to guidelines framing, that we need to discuss and touch upon a concept of licensing of intellectual property rights. Now, will allowing licensing of intellectual property rights from the institute to startup, is it going to happen? Ideally, the students and the faculty members intending to initiate a startup based on technology developed or co-developed by them or the technology owned by the institute should be allowed to take a license on the same technology on the easy terms, either in terms of equity in the venture or else even as a license fees or even as a royalty to obviate the early stage financial burden. So this is one way by which you can have you can deal with the licensing of intellectual property rights. Now, one more way by which we can nurture the growth is by allowing the setting up of a startup, including the social startup, the working time, part-time people for the startups while studying, working. Higher education institutes may allow their students, their staff to work on their innovative projects, setting up the startup projects, including the social startups, or they can work as an intern part-time in startup business. The students can be studying, they can be working. The student entrepreneurs may earn credits for working on innovative prototypes or business models. So institute may need to develop clear guidelines to formalize this kind of a mechanism. The student innovators may also be allowed to opt for startup in place of their mini project or major project or seminars, summer trainings. The area in which the students want to initiate a startup may be an interdisciplinary one, or it could be a multidisciplinary. However, the student must describe how they will separate and clearly distinguish their ongoing research activities as a student from work being conducted as a startup, so that one important distinction should be made out. Students who are there under the incubation but are pursuing some of the entrepreneurial ventures while studying should be allowed to use their address in the institute to register their company with a due permission from the institute. Whatever the companies that are starting up, if that startup is taking the help of the institute, once that startup is up and running, with the permission of the institute, the startup should be registered under the Companies Act, or even it can be registered as a proprietorship, or even it can be a limited company or limited private company as well. So student entrepreneurs should be allowed to sit for examination even if their attendance is less, that minimum permissible percentage with a due permission from the institute. Those students who are pursuing entrepreneurship as a career, they should be allowed to sit for the examination if the attendance is less. Because this is one of the thing that the government of India wants to promote is entrepreneurship, and they believe that even entrepreneurship is also a part of their learning. Higher education institutes should allow their students to take summer year breaks, even more depending upon the decision of review considered by the institute, to work on their startups, as well as they can rejoin the academics whenever they want to complete the course. The student entrepreneurs may earn academic credits by their efforts while creating an enterprise. So the institute should set up some kind of a review committee for the review of startups by the students. And it can be based on the progress made. It may even consider some of the appropriate credits for the academics as well. So the institute should explore provisions for accommodation of entrepreneurs within the campus for some period of time. So this way, nurturing will be more. And institutes should also allow faculties and staff to take off for the semester or even year, depending upon it is called as sabbatical leaves. Now, unpaid leaves or casual leaves or earned leaves for working on the startups, and they can come back again to the institute to join. Institute should consider allowing use of its resources like faculty, student, staff wishing to establish startups as one of the fulfilling kind of an effort. The seniority and the other academic benefits during such period may be preserved for such faculty or the staff. Okay, so the institute can also come up with some kind of programs called as PGDBM program in innovation entrepreneurship, or an institute can come up with an MBA program itself, specializing more about entrepreneurship development, right? So these programs where one can get a degree while incubating as well as nurturing a startup company. Now, the ICT as well as UGC have come up with already a guidelines in this regard. So some of the institutes, they can come up offer a PGDBM program. It can be a one-year diploma course in entrepreneurship. So in this course, the students can learn how to come up with how to start a business, and at the same time earn a degree specializing in starting the business. or even institute can come up with its own MBA as well. Now, higher education institutes should facilitate the startup activities, technological development by allowing faculties to use institutional infrastructures, facilities as per the choice of the future entrepreneurs. Um, Firstly, there can be a collaboration between the institute and the entrepreneurship based on the training. The first one is training. That is where the institute can collaborate with the entrepreneurs. Second possibility is the mentorship support on the regular basis. Mentorship support on the regular basis. Third one is the facilitation in variety of areas, including technology development, ideation, creativity, design thinking, fundraising, or even financial management, cash flow management, new venture planning, business development, product development, and all these things. So this is where there is a possibility of having the facilitation. Institute may also link the startup to other seed fund providers like angel funds, venture funds. So these people can set up a seed fund once the incubation activity is nurtured. Right. So these are some of the things. So one of the important thing that I just want to touch upon here is now some of these startup entrepreneurs, they come to the college they approach the higher education institutes, and how the higher education institute should charge them. Should there be a fee? Yes or no? Or number two is should an institute become one of the investors? Now, in case if the institute decides to become one of the investors, so ideally it should be registered as a society. That is number one criteria. And number two important criteria is the institute may take 2% to 9% equity stake in the startup based on the brand used, based on the faculty contribution, based on support provided and use of institute's intellectual property right. Let me tell you that a limit of 9.5% is suggested so that institute has no legal liability arising out of startup. The institute should normally take much lower equity share unless its full-time faculty or staff have substantial shares in it. Okay, so that is one important thing that we need to remember. All right. So one of the other important topic that I just wanted to touch upon is the product ownership rights for technologies developed at the institute. Now, if an entrepreneur comes up with a product of his own, if he comes up with a product of his own, then who will be the real owner of it? Who will be the real owner of it? Now, there are three ways by which the inventors or the entrepreneurs and the institutes can come together to license the product, or they can launch an intellectual property rights to any commercial organizations with investors having primary say. License fee should be either some of these. For example, first option could be upfront fees or one-time technology transfer fee, which the entrepreneur gives it to the institute. Okay, so that is first. Second is a royalty as a percentage of the sales price. Say, for example, the entrepreneur, the startup owner, he starts selling the things. He starts selling this technology, or he can start even selling out the product. Now, whatever the royalty, it could be like 1%, 2% of the royalty that he will be paying. The royalty should be based on the sale price, and that should be paid back to the institute. And number three is the shares in the company licensing the product. The institute can become an investor, and the company becomes a registered company with a share trading, with a share listing, and that is where the institute can become an investor. And the institute can become an investor, and the company becomes a registered company with a share trading, with a share listing, and that is where the institute can become an investor, and the company becomes a registered company with a share trading, with a share listing, and that is where the institute can become an investor, and the company becomes a registered company with a share trading, with a share listing, and the profits get divided. So this is how product ownership rights for the technologies developed at the institutes can be collaborated with each other. So these are some of the things that I just thought of discussing. Some of the things, just to recap on whatever that we discussed until so far, are some of the strategies that we discussed, particularly related to the governance of entrepreneurship cells, how we can do startup in national innovation policy, how we can strategize it to implement it. And we also discussed about some of the startups enabling the institutional infrastructure, the combination between the startups and the institutional infrastructure. And we also discussed about some of the some of the strategies, how we can nurture the innovations and as well as the startups. So the focus here of all the discussion here is we teach a lot of things to the students. We teach about balance sheets. We teach about science. We teach about history. But at the end of the day, we teach them to make the students to work for somebody else. And now it's a time for us teachers to think a little different. Instead of making the student to work for somebody else, why can't we make that student to employ others? Why can't that student becomes a businessman who gives jobs to others? Instead of training students to apply for jobs, why can't we teachers train the students to make them as a job giver, somebody who employs others? To tell you, this is what is the mindset that we have, typical middle class mindset that we all carry, that our parents have been employees, they were the government employees, some were private employees, so even I will also become an employee. So this kind of stereotypical thinking, this kind of traditional thinking, we need to break it down, because we have very brilliant young boys and girls who are extremely talented, and that talent needs to be nurtured to start their own business. So initially, they just need hand-holding, a little hand-holding. Initially, they just need a little hand-holding, which will help them to start their own business, which will help them to to realize their own dreams. Okay, so here I conclude my few remarks. I thank Karvikar Madam, Angadi Madam, for giving me an opportunity for sharing my thoughts and views on this. Thank you, everyone. Hello. Hello, anybody is there, madam?
Yes, sir.
Yes, madam. We have just concluded the talk. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Now,
Good morning, one and all. It's an honor to have been asked to offer a vote of thanks on the occasion of this webinar. On behalf of R.L.Science Institute, Belagavi, and the entire management group here, I, Ms. Lakhamagouda, student coordinator of the startup committee, convey my hearty gratitude to the honorable and respected person, Dr. Sanjeev Ingalgi sir, Associate Professor, Department of Management Studies and Research, MBA. Thanks a lot for sharing your grateful words with us in today's webinar, sir. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
to our respected principal, ma'am, Dr. J.S. Kavlikar. Thank you, ma'am. President of the committee, Dr. Satisha NP, sir. I convey a thanks to you for such a great webinar. Thank you, sir. Thanks to our convener, Dr. K.L.E. Badgi, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Our startup coordinator, Ms. Sudha Sarika, ma'am. Thank you so much for this arrangement. Thank you, ma'am. Thanks to Priyanka Kamath, ma'am, for their technical support. Thank you, ma'am. Thanks to all the members of IIC committee. Last but not the least, a special thanks to all participants for their participation and making this webinar successful. Thank you, one and all.
Okay, thank you, madam. Thank you.
Hello, sir.
Yes, madam. Can we all leave now?
Yes, sir. Thank you for your valuable words.
Thank you, madam. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Participants, we'll send a feedback link in our description box. All of you fill the feedback.